Sahana bhavatu, sahanau bhunaktu, saha viryam karavavahai, tejasvinavaditam astu ma viddhishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy and vigor. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily argue with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Om Shri Rama Rama Ramati Rame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tatulyam Ramanama Varanane. We delight in the beautiful name of Shri Rama that we can easily repeat time after time, again and again. For even if we remember this name once, it bestows the fruit that is equal to the 1,000 names of that all-pervading one, Lord Vishnu. We continue our study of the story of Rama, and we commence with a chapter concerning the battle. Now you see, somebody once asked me, in fact yesterday already, in listening to this story of Rama, what is the practical use in daily life? And I think in every week that we continue the series, we are keen to explore the practical implications. So although we are dealing with a history that is enriched with mythological concepts, we have to see what is the practical meaning of it and what is the principle behind it that we can employ. The mind can be considered something like a battlefield in the beginning stages of spiritual life. Beginning stages say that things are a struggle. But when all the dust, as it were, clears away, all the clouds of misunderstanding clear away, then we can easily see that it is not a battle at all, but it is a game, a divine game, based on spiritual principles of sowing and reaping, or giving and receiving. So the story of Rama tells us about the humanity that is part and parcel of our nature, and we cannot dismiss it. There are various philosophical schools that want to dismiss this as a mere dream, or dismiss it as some kind of thing we have to get rid of. But the great sage of these modern days, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, calls it a mansion of mirth. How can we view tragedies in this way? We have to explore the fundamental nature of nature itself. And all we'll find is that this is a play of divine raves, a drama. The story of Rama is a drama. And we all have to, in the beginning, acknowledge, if we are to make any corrections in the mental field and do away with the things that are serving as obstacles in our spiritual life, namely, derived from our sense of individuality, taking the part not as a part that we play, but as an individual facing serious struggles. No doubt they feel like that, but there must be a way around it, and we are equipped for it. And Rama, denuded of all the glory of kingship, still has resources left. We will never, not one of us, ever be without resources. The divine will provide us not just adequately, but abundantly with our resources. But how we use those resources is entirely up to us. We have the freedom to do it. And so the first thing we need to do, if we are to combat fear, doubt, temptation, the first thing we have to do is to acknowledge what are the components in our mental field. Honestly, we have to do that. And this in Christian theology, as denoted by, let's say, John the Baptizer and Jesus, is in the language of repent. Repent means let's assess what we have. What is the condition that we have to deal with? And then how will we deal with it? And once we know what we're dealing with, once we have the information, then we can deal with it. But we have to assess it. Something like a battlefield that is about to commence, where we have to understand in a preliminary way what is the strength of the opposing forces. How can we bring up a wave or a series of waves of counter forces to combat, as it were, or neutralize all the things that we can classify as rajasantamas, egocentric efforts on the one hand, and ego preservation on the other, called rajasantamas. How can we promote opposing thoughts, sattvic thoughts, full of purity and love, thoughts which have no central identity involved in it? No sense of egocentricity, where I say I'm at the center of my universe and I have to deal with everything around. Some time ago in the Western world, we did away with a geocentric view of the universe, and then we had a solar-centric view of the universe, and now we have a broader view, but we all have essentially retained the geocentric point of view. In other words, no matter what our science says, we still think that we are in a particular position and we look up in the sky. But you see, when we go out into the space, there's no up, there's no down, there's no left, there's no right. There are no roads or avenues to take. So now the Vanara army, you'll recall, have now descended from this Mount Surila. They've entered their forest, adjoining the city of Lanka. This is where we left off. And as the army bursts in like a flood, it has the effect of frightening all the beasts and birds in the forest, who flee in all possible directions. And the great poet Valmiki describes the scene and the event in his characteristic poetic and graphic style. So gazing from below at the mountain fortress and the divinely beautiful city constructed by Vishwakarma, no less, the great architect and builder of the deities, Rama himself is again filled with wonder, because you see, what we call the mind and all the resources around us, called body and mind, and all the things in relation to that freely given, is a glorious thing. The city of Lanka, in Lanka, is a glorious, glorious place. And yet it can be destroyed in a moment by these passions, this misuse. And don't forget, there are two sides in this battle. We find Rama's side and his allies, and we find Ravana's side and his allies, internal allies, and each one thinking they're right. But there's only one avenue, there's only one right. When we look at all the wars today, we'll see these two components are there. These antagonistic positions are there. One person says I'm right, other person says I'm right. Inevitably, sometimes in the human conflicts, we have to bring in United Nations to sort it out, and they put a force and add to the conflict sometimes. So Rama looks at the city, and again he's filled with wonder at the beauty of the place and the wealth of the place. And the Vanaras, for their part, they also have a look at the Rakshasa warriors. They look at their strength, they look at their readiness for battle, the thick walls and mighty engines of defense, just as we all have to do in the mental field, and assess the strength, historical strength of the passions, and what is necessary to cultivate a will to control them. So from Lanka, all ready for war, the sounds of drums and trumpets we can imagine, and they issue from the city. and it increases the eagerness of the Vanaras for battle. The army stands in ordered divisions, just as Rama has designed and instructed it. And then looking at Lanka, he turns to Lakshmana and says, look at the beauty of the city. Now, when we say city, just to remind you, the Katha Upanishad and the Bhagavad Gita both refer to the human body as a city with 9 to 11 gates. Katha Upanishad mentions 11 gates. Bhagavad Gita puts it as 9. So it's something like a city. And this city is controlled from within. There's an internal controller whose consciousness is unflickering and whose is unborn. Lack of recognition of this is called ignorance. And as he looks at the beauty of the city, naturally, Rama's mind will turn to Sita. She would have known by now, he would think, of his arrival with the army, and maybe her depressed heart might be revived and encouraged. But he didn't say anything about this. He just engaged himself in the arrangements for the army. No matter what our goal is, our concentration has to be on the here and now and the detailed arrangements. If you're taking a journey, have a goal, no doubt, a destination, but don't repeatedly put your concentration there. Put your concentration on the journey, the step-by-step process. Anyway, suddenly, without any noise or warning to anyone, Sugriva springs up into the sky and lands on the terrace on top of the tower in Lanka. And there he sees Ravana seated, clad in red royal robes, like a thick black cloud seen in the red evening sky, says Valmiki. And the scar caused by the tusk of Indra's elephant in battle, it shone like a crescent moon on his chest. Now Sugriva, the king of the Vanaras, has made a very rash move. And it's a lesson to all of us. Because when he sees this, he becomes extremely angry. This is the person who has taken Sita. And even there is no such thing as justified anger, in a sense, in an emotional sense. But Ravana, he addresses him, you are caught. I am a friend and servant of Rama. This is your last day. And he springs on him and knocks off his crown to humiliate him and gives him a mighty blow. And the two, you can imagine, wrestle together for a long time. And both we can see are experts in wrestling. And all the tricks of that science were tried by each. And we may also, in dealing with our own psychological and emotional conditions, be in a kind of wrestling match ourselves. But all the tricks of that science of wrestling, they were all tried by each one. We'll note how Sugriva wrestled his brother also. And Ravana was at the end of his resources. And so he discards wrestling, the physicality of it, and takes to magic. Magic means a thought movement that is powerful. When we use mantras, we are using mental movements. And realizing his power, and Sugriva disentangles himself and springs back to where Rama was. And of course, on his return, the Vanara leaders, they see the son of Surya return, and they shout praises, make a great noise of congratulations, as they are wont to do. And this rash and reckless thing, because it doesn't really become the king to do this. King has to maintain some dignity. In our own life, we have to maintain some dignity and systematically deal with our problems, whatever they may be. And so the Rakshasas have got some idea, of course, of the mettle of the foes that they're up against. just to give a warning shot, not to underestimate the battle that is about to commence. And Rama, of course, is also glad to see his old friend come back and return safely. And he looks at some of the wounds that have been inflicted during this wrestling. And these wounds are bleeding on his body. And of course, he gives wise counsel. Sugriva, I'm filled with wonder and joy at this, your valorous exploit on the one hand, but what you did wasn't right. It's not for a king to rush into risks. It's not for us, anybody who is in a position of control, as we all are potentially, to take risks. How could you suddenly, without consulting anyone, take such a dangerous course? And Sugriva, in all humility, confesses his fault. He says, it's true, it was an improper thing to rush into battle without consulting you. But when I saw the villain, I just went to observe. I didn't really go to engage in battle, who had insulted Sita so badly. I was overwhelmed by anger, and I forgot my duty. We should not be overwhelmed by anger to the extent that we forget our own duty and responsibilities. The Vanara army surrounded Lanka on all sides in the manner laid down by Rama now. And then Rama sends for Angada and says to him, Prince, please take this message from me to Ravana. This is a last message. Tell him, look, great sinner, your end is approaching. Rama waits at your fortress gate, ready for battle, trusting to the divine grace of all the deities. You have become proud and wicked. This is the fault. Pride and immorality. You have troubled the world too long and committed too many heinous sins. So the time has now come for the world to be cleansed of you. Now you may say, but Lanka is not the world. How does this impact the world? We have to understand that there's a universal cause and effect law that everybody is involved in. In modern kind of science, it's called sometimes the butterfly effect. A butterfly beats its wings on one side and affects everywhere. You cannot make any movement without having a push and pull or oscillating, vibrating effect on something else. What we call today's weather, let us say in Dublin, is actually caused by global forces. It's nothing to do with the Irish temperament. The Irish temperament comes as a result of it, of course, no doubt. Anyway, his message goes on like that. So, if you come into the open and fight and die in battle, your sins will be washed away and you'll gain a place in the world above as a hero. Last chance. But if you love your life, please humbly restore Sita to her Lord and beg for forgiveness. Now, of course, his sin is pride. I don't think he'll go for it. Then you can escape it with your life. And whatever happens, you are fit to be king no longer. The kingdom of Lanka now belongs to Vibhishana. Vibhishana? Who appointed Vibhishana? Well, Rama himself does it. He is worthy to rule and protect his people. And if you are willing to surrender and seek safety, then have your obsequences performed in advance. Do all your funeral arrangements now and bid final farewell to all your dear possessions in Lanka and prepare for death. Come out and meet Rama in battle. So, this is the message that I want you to deliver. And he sends Angada off to deliver this message to Ravana. And so, as instructed by Rama, the bold and courageous Angada delivers his message. Listen, Ravana, I am the son of Ali, whom you no doubt remember. I have come as Rama's messenger, and the time for your freedom from sin has come. You may, if you choose, die in battle. and you can attain the Swarga of brave men, the heavens of brave people, cleansed of your foul sins. But if life is dear to you, then you may beg it of Rama after humble surrender, and he never refuses mercy to a suppliant. If what I have heard about you is true, you will elect to fight, which means you choose to die. I would advise you to take last leave of your kinsfolk and complete your final funeral arrangements for yourself, and for none of your race will be left to perform them, none of them. Look, your last on lovely Lanka. That's the message. Now, of course, this adds fuel to the fire, and Ravana's rage knows no bounds, and his anger flares up like a fiery flame. And Ravana orders, seize Angada, seize this person, seize him, kill him. He's a villain. He shouts this out, and of course, at once two Rakshasas catch hold of Angada, and he rose in the sky, carrying these two Rakshasas on either side of him, and then throws them down. He rises higher up, and coming down, kicks and breaks off the tower of the king's palace, and then with a single leap, he returns to where Rama is. And dazed by Angada's exploit, the Rakshasas are now filled with fear. They realize they have underestimated their opponents. But they don't disclose it. And Ravana too, of course they fear Ravana, but Ravana too heaves a heavy sigh at the sight of the broken tower, and he looks on it as a bad sign, but he's still blinded by the circumstances. And as soon as Angada returns, Rama issues orders to the army to begin the assault on Lanka. And you see, in those days, the assault only occurs with a sense of dharma. It only occurs once every other final avenue has been explored. Negotiation is gone, surrender is gone, every opportunity to escape this battle, all of this is gone, and still the battle commences. Now, of course, we have to understand that in those days, no civilian gets involved. This is one of the great noble things. The chess game that we have today, seemingly derived from Persia, well, in the ancient days, Persia, India, they were really the same geographic location. And so we see there that there is an army, conventionally anyway, with rules and strategies. And the chariot corps is there, and the infantry is there, and so on and so forth. But we have to understand that these are vanaras, and they have to obey the same kinds of laws. But one fundamental thing, that no innocent person is involved directly, anyway, in the conflict. Anyway, Sukha, the Rakshas's scout, he goes and reports to Ravana. He's done his job. He's had a look. And he says, I did my job according to your instructions, but my efforts were in vain, fruitless. They were rough with me. They held me up, and they made me feel thankful to be allowed to come back. And Rama, to whom it was his sport to slay Virada, Kabanda, Kara, and others, has arrived with a great army, the army of Sugriva. And they have somehow come to know of the place where Sita is held captive. This is the information I can bring back. And the bears and monkeys have crossed the sea and are standing ready for battle before Lanka. The visible earth is covered with this army. There's nothing to be gained now by discussions and debates. This is the fact. And their hate can only be quenched with our blood. So, King, please consider well what needs to be done and do it. And then he adds with fear, because You see, it's not good to be a messenger. In a suppressed voice, we may yet escape if Sita is restored. Now, of course, Ravana is enraged. What did you say? Let no one talk to me of Sita being restored. That's the finish of it. They don't know my strength who talk like this. I can slay the gods, the Vanaras, the Gandharvas, the Yakshas. My darts can burn up Indra himself and Yam too. Wait and see how this wretched fellow Rama and his army will be destroyed. You'll see it. And Ravana believes what he says. And he has dwelt long on his previous achievements and, filled with pride, has become foolishly obstinate now. Then he sends for 2 of his ministers and tells them, scouts have come and reported that a large army has built a causeway to Lanka, and they've come over here now. And it's indeed strange news, but as yet nothing serious has happened. So go and observe the enemy and bring me a full and detailed report of their strength. This is the way in which we deal with things, of course. We have to look and see, assess properly what the difficulty is before we make any rash movements. It's all about strategies and plans. Anyway, accordingly, the spies assume the shape of Vanaras, because don't forget they have this gift, and coming to Rama's camp and mixing with the other Vanaras, they look around. But Vibhishana, discovering their disguise, he catches hold of them and produces them before Rama. And they plead that they were messengers sent by their king and prayed for release. It's a common practice even today that the enemy disguise themselves as the opposition and move about in the camp. And in this case, they were discovered. The technical term for this in modern warfare is called pseudo-operations. Anyway, Rama says, show them our army. We won't hold anything back. Let them have a good look around before they return. Give them full and free rein, give them a full opportunity to see our strength and report it back. And oh, you Rakshasa messengers, when you go back to Ravana, please tell him this: the strength on which you relied when you carried Sita away is to be put now to the test. Your fortress, your city, and your army will be destroyed. Rama's darts will pierce your body. And yes, you convey this message to your king. And the spies, they hear Rama's words and they agree to convey them to their master. And then, of course, impelled, well, perhaps by force of habit, they say, victory to thee. The Vanara army took this to be a fine omen. The spies go back to Ravana and say, O king, we are discovered, unfortunately, by Vibhishana, and were in fear of death. But Rama would not let them kill us, and he ordered our release. Compassion even in these circumstances. King, our enemies are determined. Raman, Lakshmana, Sugriva, the Vanara king, and Vibhishana, they're all of one mind. It's difficult for us to prevail against an army led by such warriors. We have seen Rama, who is the son of Dasaratha, and he impressed us as being by himself, just him alone, strong enough to destroy our city and our army. We have seen the courage of the Vanaras and their eagerness for battle, and it's really not expedient to try the fortune of war with them. So it seems best to restore Sita to Rama. Do consider what should be done. Now let's assess how many warnings Ravana has had. How many warnings has he been given? And still no battle has ensued as yet. And of course the advice was sincere from their part. It was well meant. But you see, Ravana wasn't in a mood to entertain that. And he couldn't control his fury. And he says, even if the whole world turns against me, this is rash judgment, I shall not yield to fear. Even if all the Devas, the Gandharvas, and the Vanaras join together to oppose me, I shall not return Sita. Because you are thrashed by the enemy, you give me this cowardly advice. Faint hearts, where's the enemy who can vanquish me? And so you can see again the endorsement of Ravana's difficulty. His difficulty is not the army of Ravana, of Vanaras before him, or Rama, or Lakshmana, or any of the great warriors. No, his difficulty is with himself, his own pride. And the same with all of us. We can blame the whole world for our difficulties, but really the final analysis is we alone are responsible. Sri Krishna puts this very clearly, in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, dealing with meditation, requiring self-control to start with, this assessment that actually you are your own best friend or your own worst enemy, and you alone can elevate your mind or bring it down. It's entirely up to you. Having said what he has said, Ravana goes to his high tower himself and surveys for himself the enemy's strength. It's interesting that he never did this before, but his ministers and officers were also with him. And those who had gone out to have a reconnaissance, they describe at length the Vanara chiefs and the army behind them. And they recount the strength of that huge army of bears and monkeys gathered together with the far-flung forests, mountains, and river valleys of the world. And they speak of their physical strength and courage, and their firm devotion to Rama, their unity and eagerness they express to slay the Rakshasas, and all those that had gone, they confirmed all of this. Look, one of them said, that majestic and graceful youth with matted locks, looking like a hermit, and yet with a bow in his hand, that's Rama. See how he looks round with eyes of love and commands and his forces, and how his glances seem to brighten the quarters and to fill all their devotion and confidence. See how the mighty armed warriors near him. Look at his brother, it must be Lakshmana, a peerless bowman and Rama's second soul. And look, next to him is Sugriva, and Sugriva is wearing Vali's garland. He is the equal of Vali himself. And there next to him, you see Vibhishana, your brother. So it's not easy to vanquish such warriors. Consider now, please, at this stage, before the battle has commenced, and take all the steps necessary for victory in such a situation. You have to strategize according to what you see. Take the appropriate measures. Don't look for somebody else's broken ladder in your endeavors. Construct your own well-constructed system. So as the ministers extol the strength of the enemy, Ravana's rage grows more and more furious. This is the way, of course, of a tyrant. And the wise king is never angry with those who bring him true information. Or he is not angry with his ministers who give him good advice, even if it's against his own instinct. Okay, so most of what I was saying has been left off. I'll try to summarize a little bit. So the scouts have come back. They've reported, unfortunately, about the army. And naturally, Ravana is in a rage about it. And he's swollen with his own pride. And he tells everybody, he recounts all his victories of the past and all the people that he's defeated. And so he then goes to the tower himself to assess. And in assessing, he sees the strength of all the armies. He's going with all his generals too. And his general now in detail assessing the force before them. And they are inwardly quite worried about this, of course. And Ravana probably secretly too is there. So knowing this, he resorts to a different tactic. And he goes to the Ashoka Grove and he persuades a sorcerer to go along with a simulated head of Rama in his hand. And he tells Sita, well, you see, yes, these people, they came, they were confronted, and at night we slayed them all, and here's Rama's head. Well, naturally, Sita is beside herself with concern at this, but then Rama is called away to the Ashoka hall, to the assembly hall, and his ministers want to have a small conference with him, a strategy about how they handle the situation. And as soon as he leaves the Ashoka Grove where Sita is living, the magic of the sorcery is gone. Now, of course, for all of us, it means that when we remove the components of our own delusion, then the mirage of what keeps us bound to this world in ignorance also vanishes. And Sita is having a female attendant who takes a motherly approach and explains to her, no, this is all sorcery. I can assure you, Rama and his Vanara force are at the gates. And at that point, she hears all the cacophony of noise, drums and trumpets and so on, all to do with warfare. So this is where in summary, where we left off. A lot of what was told has been lost, of course. The important thing, and this is how I ended up before I rebooted for everybody, that the important lesson for us is this. You see, behind all the modern cartoons and all the comic books of the modern day world, we don't find this level of morality that we find in this story. And so by the age of about 9, a child should be explained to him the deeper implications, the example of a moral life that Rama presents, and the reality of the ups and downs and so-called tragedies and joys of this life. And the fact that we all have the equipment, we are all fully equipped and resourced to cater for every kind of vicissitude and difficulty, but we require spiritual qualities. Spiritual qualities means, of course, purity of mind, strength, courage, determination, perseverance, truthfulness. All of these qualities we require, and with these we will combat any of our enemies. You can see the chief enemy that we have is pride. And there it is. Ravana will not admit defeat, and he will definitely not restore Sita back. So his strategy is, let me go and win Sita back on the basis that what you think or how you evaluate the world is how everybody evaluates it. And that is not so. So Ravana thinks that if he wins Sita over to him and makes her his chief queen, that Rama will say, well, it's all lost then, because Sita has succumbed, I'll go back. He's assuming that everybody is on that same materialistic level, and of course Rama is not. Rama is above that. And so this trickery doesn't work. We are deceived left, right, and center with all kinds of excuses that obscure our chief difficulty, namely pride. Pride, an egocentric position that puts us at the center of the world, and we try and deal with things from that point of view, and it doesn't work. It simply compounds the difficulty. And so we leave it off there. We leave that chapter. We're entering a new chapter now from there. And the current chapter ends with this rattle of this cacophony of battle about to commence, and how things can be handled from there. And just like every other conflict, it could have easily been resolved. And the first resolution would be, don't go and capture Sita in the first place. So Ravana, in the assembly hall, he is duly informed that Rama's Vanar host surrounds Lanka, not just enters into it, is now surrounding the whole of Lanka like a tumultuous sea. And of course, he's not in a mood to hear this. And so in an angry mood, he goes up to the tower of his mansion. He surveys the scene. And on every side now, he sees the Vanara warriors who have armed themselves with trees and boulders, not conventional weapons, but whatever is found around. Our resources are local, and they're fully and abundantly supplied. There is no problem or difficulty given to us, as it were, that we do not have the resources to get around. So, using all the local materials, trees and boulders, that's all. And he wonders how he can destroy this vast invading force because he's outnumbered. You want some kind of image for this? Those of you who are familiar with the, I think it's called Rorke's Rift, where British people, British soldiers, encamp themselves, and they don't realize how many Zulu warriors in South Africa there are. And I think there's a film on it called Zulu. But their pride in their military superiority belies the fact that with unsophisticated weapons, they are surrounded and outnumbered. There's a kind of image that comes to my own mind with regards to this. And so this is an invading force. And at the same time, of course, as this happens, then Rama, he sees the city of Lanka guarded by the Rakshasas. He sees the defenses, in other words. And he can see with his mind's eye the sad figure of Sita held captive within these walls. And then he orders an immediate assault. And this is where we will leave it. All right. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.